Chumdunde Gombo Jahorayang La Shan Za Lo Gango Lo Jumni Jumjani Da Namda Razar Jenyen Dongo Juja Zujirani Dagara Lawanza Ganda de Bezora Marag Mando Dengra Jizar Dozo Gala Ju Darje Yala Duje Andan Som Dutraji Jonya Monya Loli Jizaro Domzaj Maru Mazir Dungurum Yoga Jenny Jomzara Junam Doni Dajasa Chindazo Yundali Yadi Duga Jada Jada Jenny Yanjin Dalu Mazir Jahorayang Landa Umara Bazanada 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 Tudun Jijin Jero Zirji Dalu Damam Barazan Quadan Damju Jonlu Domai Luju Bubi Nawa Jida Sur Nyaji Jimbo Zudun Yumi Jan Zone Molum Jimbo Ajata Pagaradangan Zandu Jermado Dumba Diji Janla Shanzar Lo Tatirang Matsundanayo Pivi Tani Jukbachu Suko Tani Lomana Batam Chetang Tani Gato Poba Yang Mambozundu Tani Tamchela Gongmo Delakan Samjijin.
Good evening to everyone who is gathered here tonight, all the Rigpa students and also the Tibetans who have come along too.
Tani tari nga tang jiba tani Rigpa Chusukona la yongbare tani tang tangbo seni la tani Rigpa Chusukona la song tani tang niba tani Canberra la yang tani Rigpa Chusukona la song tani yang kirtalo yang tani sini tani Rigpa Chusukona la song tani tarin tani tang jibayin.
This evening is actually my fourth time to give a teaching at a Rigpa Centre. The first time was last year in Sydney, and then this year I had a chance to give teachings in the Canberra Rigpa Centre and then at the Sydney Centre again. So tonight here in Newcastle is my fourth time.
Tani Rigpa Chusukona tani lama so girimbo cheda tani nga so lama yujin noro tani kong namba halipa tengnang nipore.
Sogyur Rinpoche and my root guru, my teacher, Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, were very close in their minds.
Tani tendi yimbi jimtsenji nga so Rigpa Chusok tani zambalanga sacha kaala yo na yang tani nga rang so yang tela gabuche yo.
So for this reason, wherever we go and we encounter or we meet with a Rigpa Centre and its students, we feel very happy.
Tani muksar ka jigo wachigla nga so Rigpa Chusok tani sacha jamba tang mandrawa cheni sacha nde la yobi Rigpa Chusok tani nga so sangni la yongkan ka tani boba tsoga tani chunya ya ta tani tsokban tsoya ta tutsuto la muksar ka tani pe gyapkyur chimbo nanganda tani pe nyang tabani kwaran chijigin.
And there's something special about the Rigpa Centre here in Newcastle that I'd like to mention, and that is the support that's given by the centre to the local Tibetan community who are able to come here and conduct their activities and conduct their Dharma practice. And I would just like to give my sincere and heartfelt thanks for the support that Rigpa is giving to the local Tibetan community.
Tani nga zo boba nzambo lang na yo susu la tani boba mangbo tani tani jamni taga dendu yinna yang kozo changma tani chuluk la taba pe yakbo yongkan tani tagdare nga zo boba yin sardi chu jibna tani jib samkan yongkan tani tagdare yinna yang tani ta sacha dewa la tani boba zo sargatun tani je yongdi tani chusuk ta te zo yakbo meni tani chu jib saga tani sacha te yakbo zo gana yinna yang yongkan mandu.
In general, there are Tibetans now all around the world gathered in communities, and we are a people of great faith, and in general, Tibetans are very keen to practice the Dharma. However, given the fact that in many places there aren't appropriate Dharma centers or conditions for practice, there in fact are many Tibetans who don't practice the Dharma or don't come to Dharma centers to do so.
사천 대화라 옛날 때니 보바츠 르바추 조건나라 용네 돈반도야 로종시야 따서 약보용디니 고조라 베 약보용근도 고조 셈페 가근도 때나 되니 가서 문터니 된디 약교로 나와라 되니 과든치 문터니 약교 나오르지.
So that the Tibetan community here in Newcastle can come here, they can do chanting, they can study. I thank you very much for the support that's been given up until now, and hope very much that this support can be ongoing.
Teni tonda ni pala ta ngarang so derang ga chutete teni da sha gare teni nga so derang ga chutu sha bandi teni lama yujinoro teni sunga teni tiftum lai ngada zero teni tando teni samala teni marjure.
The topic of this evening's teaching is the Victory Doa, the sound of the celestial drum by Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok.
Teni nga so chutu chita shekala teni nga so chutu shakare teni di oto teni chutu shekaza ka nangla teni nga so zhwa zhelun shene teni chutu ko samlo jiri teni shekare.
So I'd like to give a teaching for about 1.5 hours this evening, and then reserve about half an hour for questions you might have.
Tani nga so mi mamboz nafshogla tani tanga so tani poker tani lama chashul tani lama zanshu lama angtangbo ti so tani nga so zambalang tani sacha mamboz la tani par jamsongwares.
To the Tibet's greatest lamas, Tibet's finest lamas, you could say, are scattered all around the world.
Tani tendi yimbi jimsenji tani ta chechoye na ten zamalanga sharshogre chabardan nufshogla tani Yoruburi America rin so nala yongkeng me mambo tani nga so Australia la tatangda bore tani checho nga so popa lama tani angtangbo te so tani suso tani tenyata tani korang so gondani wangjia chazia tani korkape yakbo mambo thoyore.
And so for this reason, students in other countries, in Asia, but particularly in the West, particularly in America and in Europe, and also here in Australia, students like yourselves have the opportunity to receive empowerments and to receive teachings from some of the finest teachers of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And to rely on such teachers in your Dharma practice is a really wonderful opportunity to have.
Tane perna ngacho lo kashi lo ni gongla tani agong ramboche tani ndene tani korang la jiden tani okosofar la tani korang la jiden ga tani chongda tani jin soksong ti tokla tani korang ga zambalang ga tani te loma mambo lebndu.
A couple of years ago, when Agung Rinpoche passed away, there was a memorial meeting or a memorial conference that was held in Oxford, and many of his former students gathered at this conference.
Tani jiden ti tola tani ngarang yang tani rojire song tani ti kapsa tani koso loma mambo yari yone tani mambo zuka kaja shasong tani kaja ti sola tani nyangi tani ngarang la tani korkup shonsongs.
And during the conference, many students spoke about their experience in being students of Agong Rinpoche, and I had the chance to hear what they said.
Tani loma ti so mang chi shu tani ta korang so Agong Rinpoche tani tenni lama tenni tani lo napjiin lo jibjiin tani lo simjiin tani zenkan tak jendus.
And most of them all gave accounts of how they had been students of Agong Rinpoche for 30 years, 40 years, and even 50 years.
Tani koso tendi yin rambo chigo nangla tani te lama chik teni teni lojong she ne teni samba chick tola teni lama chigla teni ta tenni tapa jane teni lojong shene yarangbo tenji parchir message chipo te tinala teni lama chig teni tenji tapa tambo shine teni de dendos.
These were students who had essentially relied on this single teacher for their entire lives, reposing their faith in him, studying with him, and practicing with him in an extremely stable way.
Tani nipadanga so America la tani yang jongbaran bochi ga tani loma tani mambola yang athusong.
And then last year I also had the opportunity to meet with many of the former students of Trungpa Rinpoche.
Tani korang so tarta yena tani koso mangboz tani ta lo tukchi lo dunchi tana tani lo jachi tani je changen tani res.
And now many of these students are 60 or 70 or even a few 80 years of age.
Tani jongbaran bochi tani ndene tata yang tani yang rambore charsong res.
Of course, it's been a long time now since Trungpa Rinpoche passed away.
Yenang korang pe taba changmala tani taba halipa ga taba korang so lamala gawa tang taba ta tisu pe halipa kozo la tarung duks.
However, their love and their faith for their teacher is still extremely strong.
Tani korang so zina nga so tangbo lama ga lor gisha ne sama gajak jab ne tani shi tani sha tsari jini yang sama ngu chima tang tani shi gyo ze kozo tri zegndus.
And they were all students, when they told stories about their teacher, they would end up crying and shedding tears.
Tani ti nangla korang jongbaran bochi ga tani loma yang rambo tani shi dengen ga tani gabo tani gargi tani singdus.
And there was one man in particular who had been a student of Trungpa Rinpoche for a very long time.
Tani korang ga chimni para korang ka leka lesa korang ka zhongli khangla paran rogo na tani lamka zhonglum ka nala lamka khachi ginni tini rogo undus.
And in order to get from his home to the place where he worked, it was necessary to go to wind around a few streets.
Tani ko ngama tini korang lo chung impi kapsu korang ka lama yopi kapsu tani korang lamka tinala paran rogi kapsu kapsu tini jongbaran boche ka tini langkhur tangne gyamne yone tini korang la lagdashi ni tini chini rogo resi.
And sometimes when he was younger and when Trungpa Rinpoche was still alive, as he would be going along the road, Trungpa Rinpoche would be behind him and he would wave to him.
Tani Trungpa Rinpoche ndeni yang rambo tindi rete yenna yang tarung yenna tarta yang tani ko kapsu tani te lamka te solan rovi kapsu tani korang ka sem ka nala chi marki banda ta mare banda tindi mambo yongwi kapsu tani korang kapsu korang ka Trungpa Rinpoche jamne langkor tangne yongne te korang la lakba yiwanda wo tindi ka nangwa korang yonggandu te yongdi te korang ka sem ka nane te mare banda wo ta dungar nrada te marga wa ta marki patsama lamsang menro undugzi tindi zegandus.
And what he said was that even these days when he drives along the road, or sometimes when he's feeling down, he's feeling a bit despondent, he recalls those memories of when Trungpa Rinpoche was coming from behind him, driving a car and waving to him, and in recalling these memories, in an instant his bad feelings and his despondent feelings dissolve. He feels this way even after so many years.
Tani kērāng sōyāng, ngē mūs chīrī lōjī hāgō yō mārē te yinā yāng, pē nā te sōdhyā rāmbō chē tani tā nabshok lā pēp nī pē yīn rāmbō rī, te yīndi tani rīgbā chūtsok yāng tā lōjī rāmbō rīndō, te yinā tani kēchū yāng māng chīshū te pārchī sōdhyā rāmbō chē lā tēne yīn rāmbō tani yīng yō sārēs.
I'm not sure about the individual backgrounds of everybody here, but I would guess that most of you are students of Sodhyo Rinpoche. Sodhyo Rinpoche has been coming to the West and coming to Australia for some time now, and I would imagine that many of you are long-term students of his.
Tani mangchi shute tani kotso rawo tani pe taba yakbo yongken musim par tambo yongken muschigla taba jangne tani korang yendaman da tela samlo tane te denken tindi yensares checho yang mambos tindi injuries.
And I would imagine that many of you are extremely stable and extremely focused in your faith on in Tsultrim Rinpoche, that you are also stable students, just like the one that I described, Trungpa Rinpoche's former student.
Tani pe yakboresi ta ngacho tindi ngacho tindi sang ka nyamlin shengen ga lomata khabar to zoba chimbo nyamlin shengen ga loma zeti tindis gogres.
And indeed, to be a student of the Vajrayana teachings, and especially to be a student of the Dzogchen teachings, it's necessary to be a student with a stable kind of faith like this.
Tindi tini taba tambo tindi yakbo yona tini ngarang so tini zoba chimbo tonze ate tini tokres.
With a kind of faith like this, or with the kind of faith like this, then it's possible for us to realize the nature or realize the truth of reality in the Dzogchen teachings.
Tindi yendi nge samlo tangna ngacho tini nafsho komma tsama tindi reze gona ze kabore rete ta me mambuz tindi rendu tini tena tindi nguni tangna yong sona tini zoba chimbo ate tobala yang kable go mares.
So whilst perhaps I can't say that all Western students are like this, it seems that certainly an element of Western students are like this. And if they do possess this faith, then indeed to attain realization in the Dzogchen teachings is not a difficult thing. It's something we are capable of doing.
Tani ngacho terang jigpa tani lomata kabdachi bayen tani kongso me mangboz tani nyamar jela tani titsu jiri nyamlenche anda tani me mangboz tani yar lerbolan lanjone tani lojongche tan chamla de tani mangboz she te pe hale ba yagbores.
So today I was speaking with some old students of Rigpa, and they were telling me about how many students had or do practice for up to 4 hours per day, and that many students also travel to Lerabling to receive teachings. These are all extremely good things.
Tani ngacho perna charik bandra sanyiru bandra tindi tini kortela perna ngacho tabanda de chuchit perna lamala tabata tindi karchenezena jigshena tini korangcho tindi maresamna tini sikres jete yinnayang ngarangcho tini zogba chimbo tini ton tobala uni chani tabazia de pe karchishu haleba karchishu res.
So if we're talking about great thinkers or figures such as scientists or philosophers, well, they may in fact be great in their respective fields, but in terms of the Dzogchen teachings, faith in the teacher, faith is extremely important.
Tani lama ziyate pena ngarang sola tani tarwi lam tungkan tani korwa nani yar tarwa thob tarwi lam tungkan tani ngarang sola nyarji mepala nyarji kia tani sherab mepala sherab kia tani shenkan ge mo tani zola zege yore tani ngarang sola sonna pe kwadran chimbo ya res ngaso mi soso lam sonna soso lama de hal lepa tani kwadran chimbo tani yengres.
So a lama, or our teacher, our guru, is someone who shows us the path out of samsara, is someone who assists us in generating bodhicitta when we don't have it, who's someone who assists us in increasing wisdom when we don't have it to begin with. And so on account of this, we should feel great gratitude towards our teacher. And it's said in the Vajrayana teachings that we should look upon our teachers as though they were the Buddha. It's possible that our Lama may be an emanation of the Buddha, may have a level of realization equal to that of the Buddha. On the other hand, it's possible that they may not have realization of such a high level.
Tani kang taryang sangye ge yishi, tani sangye ge gongba, sangye ge tani tawada desu tamjipo mar kheroni ngarang cho ge semnang la mar tani junkhende kang tar ngarang cho lama tere ma to jamba yo mares.
In any case, the person or the individual who brought the Buddhist wisdom brought the Buddhist wisdom to us and placed it in our heart, aside from our Lama, there is no other.
Tani sangye ge gongba, zogba chimbo tawa, te gandri rawore penda sangye tawa da, tani zogba chimbo tawa zina, gongba zina, te gandri rawore zina perna, tani nga tsu chintong je chimzut rawore si shuiku, chimzut rawore si.
So we can liken the Buddhist teachings or the Dzogchen teachings to a reservoir.
Tani nga tsu lama gipa zine, tani nga rang tsu susorang ka tsayu lama, tani ti yanchul la, susorang ka tsayu lama, te mayimbi, ti yanchul la gipi lama zita lama mambu yore tani. Te so, pe na nga tsu chimzut ka nani mari yungwi chigar waka rawores.
And the lamas in our teacher's lineage, so all the past masters that have gone before, from our current lama right back through to the very beginning of the lineage, we can liken to a pipe linking the reservoir to us.
Tani chimzo kana la chiyo, tani chirbu nani mar yongne, ta ngarang tsogo tani kyamnang la lep sarti, tani kyamnang la yongwi chida tani nga tsu ta parkorja chir bungchi sui longto, or bungchi ten rabote tani ngarang susogo tsawi lama teres.
So if the teachings of the reservoir and the past masters of our lineage are the pipe, then our own Lama is like the faucet or the tap from which we get the water ourselves in our own homes.
Tani susogo nga susogo lama te ngarang tsota tani tak nishu teres.
And so our own Lama is the most proximate, the most close to us.
Tani pena nga tsu terang sangye shakya daba, ngarang tsu ungus tani nga tsu sangye shakya daba muk taya tani ga karwa yona yang, tani sangye nga tsu la tani tarwa tobya ga tabshidi kandi chigare sangye nga tsu la chu songare, tani chu de ngarang tsu nyamlin chena de ngarang tsu tarwa tobkare ma to jamba, sangye ungus pebyo na ngarang tsu kage to jamba chu cheya yo mares.
In any case, we don't currently live in a time where we can see the Buddha in face to face. However, the Buddha left us with the Buddhist teachings, and it is up to us to put them into practice ourselves.
Tani ngarang chola samlo tangna, tani sangye ge lega de, tani sizg lega yore zina sangye shakja tamba korang ge ngarang chola sangye ge tani lega de lega yo mare zi, tani ngarang chola tani ge sonam chimbo mepi gimsanji, tani nga cho sangye tani jetab ge mare. Tani sangye ge lega nrawo te, tani sig lega yore zina, ngarang cho lama ti nga chola sangye ge lega de nga cho lega yore, sangye ge shawa de, tani nga cho lama ti nga chola lega yore.
So the activity of the Shakyamuni Buddha, we don't have the good fortune in this lifetime to be able to hear his teachings by his side. However, in respect of us, the person who is achieving his function or who's performing the work of the Buddha in our lifetimes is none other than our own very Lama.
Tani shirtang nga tsugo tani chu tani chatat rawoda, tsugo nangla tani ngarang tsu ti lama la tapa te pe karchim borezi ni tani zega marezi mambo nga tsu zega mezi.
In terms of ordinary teachings, we don't often talk about the importance of having faith in the teacher.
Tani pena rikpa chusok rawo ndiri ga tani nyamlin, nguni tani nyamlin da ti nangne yang nga tsu zogba chimbola nyamlin chenken, tsugo nangla tani nga tsu lama la tapa chiya te pe karchim borezi ni tani nga tsu tani zega rezi.
However, in terms of a place like Rigpa, which is oriented quite strongly towards practice, then in this context we do talk about the importance of faith in one's teacher, and we stress very much its importance.
Tani sorgyeram boche sanglo tangbayena, tani koranga rigpa chusukko nala gawa songna chikban raworendu, tani koranga lama changma, tani kubra changma, tani shini shamduwas.
If we think about Sodhya Rinpoche, wherever you go, wherever you visit a Rigpa center, he has displayed pictures of other great masters.
Tani Sodhya Rinpoche koranga chusukko nala tani lama chogo parmangpo mangpo kubra mangpo jakba te chiburi mendukse nga cho akusufala korangla chutuksongse koranga langkorka nangla ti ngola parteni koranga lama chama par chama gerni jakjandukse te keronso hako yukiris.
It's not just in his Dharma centers that he displays the photos of past masters. When I met him in Oxford, he also had pictures of his lamas stuck onto the dashboard of the front of his car. He had sort of turned his car into a kind of shrine.
Dewi kausa teni lama tsoga kabarla tani teni koranga lama takbar jamba dang teni sorande batini jegores.
So that way, whenever he's sitting in his car, he can look at the pictures of his lamas, think of them, and pray to them.
Teni nga tso sosogo teni lama la teni sosogo tawa tokban thombo chak teni jeyongdi teni nga tso rangshik teni ti lama de ngarang la kwadran chimbo yin samba de nga tso rangshik yungores.
So when we rely on our Lama and through relying on them attain some kind of realization of a view, then automatically within us a sense of strong gratitude arises towards them.
Penanga bo la sanlo tangbaye na teni lorji ki tola joji atasha sama hako yo jire joji atasha te ngaso bo ko thon chul ko nane 보고 되니 나던 건 나네 로지가 돌아빼 할리바 되니 가서 상마가 상진라고 쓰야가 된디가 라마 잡으러 된디지.
In Tibetan history, in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, there was a great master that all of you no doubt know, Jia Atisha. He was an extraordinary master and one that everyone holds in very great esteem.
Then the
And Atisha himself had many teachers.
Then lama mambu titso nangni then koranga shangchipji sim shamdang nyangji shangchip sim jishaga then lama den lama sim yore dinani sodi then serlang baze gare nga so dharma kirti ze te korang reis.
And among all of those teachers, there were 3 who had given him teachings on bodhicitta. And among those 3, there was one in particular, Dharmakirti.
Teni Dharmakirti zate korang Indonesia ga teni lama tendizre.
And he at that time dwelled in Indonesia.
Teni joji teni korang teni Dharmakirti ga teni kumdane teni yang rambo lojong shi nyamlin shi di teni korang ga gilla shangchip ko sempe yabo haliba teni sam tumbu teni zuteni kisongwares.
And Atisha, by spending a long time practicing by the side of Dharmakirti, was able to arouse a very strong, a very high level of bodhicitta.
Tani jima choji adasha bola yongine kamna tani koranga lama shirtang choji tani korang lama chogo tani lama chola tani pe tapa haliba tani shenkan tani rezi timbi kapsa pena koranga choji lama Dharmakirti mayimba lama jamba chogo tani channi jodna tani lama tisogo mang la tani zona te korang dharmo jar karez.
In generally speaking, Atisha was extremely respectful of all of his teachers, not just Dharmakirti's. Whenever he would mention the name of another teacher, he would bring his palms together in a gesture of respect.
Tani korang ka tharmo nyangka la jar kare ma to pa tharmo sho la jar ka mare se lama jamba te sola.
For he would usually bring his hands together at his heart. He wouldn't bring them to the top of his head.
Tani lama dharma karti ko tani chan jodna tani ko lamsang tap lagba ni bo shivor la tani tharmo jar kare.
However, when he spoke of Dharmakirti, then he would bring his hands together immediately to the crown of his head.
Tani lama jamba te sogam chandi jodna ko mukchu tang ko mare shanchip tang ko mare.
And the other teachers that he had, although he felt great respect for them, he wouldn't shed tears when he mentioned their name.
Tani lama dharma karti tani sanlap jodna tani ko namgin shanchip tani tongare.
However, when he spoke of Dharmakirti, he quite commonly shed tears.
Tani korang loma sogo tani joje adashala trawa kondu tani korang lama kashi lana korang thammo nyangkala jar kondu kashi lana sho la jar kondu tani kashi lana shanchip tongo mandu kashi lana shanchip tongo tani kare re gimsan kare re te lama te so kashi pe yundan chimbo da kashi de tindi yundan chimbo mepa tindi reweze korang ya trawa kondu.
And so several people asked him, why is it when you talk of some teachers, you bring your hands together at your heart, and when you speak of Dharmakirti, you bring your hands together at the top of your head? And why is it that sometimes you cry and other times you don't? Is this depending on the qualities or lack of qualities in respect of both teachers or the different teachers that you've had?
Sama yundan yorezite yundan kashi yundan yopada kashi yundan mepa tendi mare te mareze teni gimsan karezena teni ngarang ke gella shamdang nyarjeda teni shangchub ke sim tendi to teni lama jamba ke teni te toni teni nge lapthap ke mare teni dharma kirti ke teni kumden ni ngala teni yakbo kere te ti gimsan jing ne korang la tharmo sho la ja kare korang kam samjupi ne kam ngaram teni mukchi tong gimsan de tere sone teni te pe kola pe kadron chimbore tore sone sonyares.
And Tisha answered that no, it wasn't because he viewed some teachers as having good or many qualities and others having less. In his view, all of his teachers were possessed of very virtuous qualities. The reason that he would bring his palms together at the top of his head when he spoke of Dharmakirti was that it was in his presence and by his side that he was able to really arouse loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And it was with Dharmakirti that he received the most profound teaching and practice realization.
Teni nga zola lama la tapa yakbo sim ka tang ni tapa pe tapa yakbo yongken so teni lama la soran dip tendi shina korang ka tapa ti sim na yar ki wi ne kumna teni korang ka sim ka na la ma ki pa da teni modi wa da teni dungur da teni jam mambo sim thola yo na te so sama lam sa par men jo rezi tapa ti yar chang shik chimbu bar member wan ra wo je wi ka se teni korang ka chik sim ka thola mari pa mambo. And
for people who do have an extremely strong and extremely ardent faith in their teacher, then it's possible at the moment or when they generate this extremely strong sense of faith that their feelings of unhappiness or suffering or ignorance, just by generating this sense of faith in their teacher and praying towards them, that these feelings can be dispelled immediately.
Teni Quran sogor mulum gane kamla lama teni jarnjariata lama wa song tuyata teni yona teni Quran pe simla kebo yona nima kaji la Quran sim ganala pe demota kebodang.
And then if students with such faith in their teachers dream of their teachers appear in their dreams, then for a couple of days afterwards they will feel extremely happy, extremely elated.
Teni tindi tapayak boyo tsarwi jini penanga tso lama jigyo nanja, yana lama ndetsa nanja, soso ranga teni nyamlinga tolaye nare, soso ranga leka tolaye na, teni njugpatang, manjugpatang, rendugze, mendugze, tso lama ga, te korang tso la teni lam tongare se, lama ndetsarwi jisi yang, lama ga tindi lamtum she yong kres.
And once students are able to generate faith of this level in respect of their teachers, then whether or not their teacher is still living in this world or not, they are still able to provide guidance on their practice and on other aspects of life.
Teni ngazo susorang lama dang teni nguru rumbuchi pama sambawa teni nyamdo tapajak sora tamna teni namgin teni ga sorwati pe yakbo yong kres.
And if we make frequently or make a habit of praying to our teacher and to our Guru Rinpoche at the same time, then we can generate very good results in terms of our faith.
Tani tabat tani karchim bozo yembate tani nyamlin yakbo shinkang motso tani sosorang nyamyung ko to hako de mato ba te jamatso chawane te rishi jabthab ko mare te tindi yembaza hako mare.
The importance of faithful practice is something that people can really only verify by their own experience, their own personal experience. It's really not something that other people are able to understand, and it's not something necessarily that is able to be explained.
Pena ngaso gengka lakba jamni tini pena dinalayo bi chiti patar ni tini khang ni tini reyona tani jod jab yong iner kumna tani korang lamsang par tini tart jinro ndo an khakpa di jinro re tin ra bo shi ni tani khoso sim marki pada sim madeva tan jikting ga tini metse ga thola jamra mambu yong wi kaps te korang lama la ta pa yak boyong kan so lama la ta pa ja tindi she jana te korang gal chi tini niba shin lu zena mendu kan tar tin niba te thong yong di tani dungar de so chama korang per na nima shar ni tar
So just as the winter sun is capable of melting drops of ice, so too is the power of blessing of one's teacher able to melt away or dissolve one's suffering.
Teni tapaga shikte yarpe teni shikmbar membar onrawo teni yongi kapsa teni tela teni koranga sim koranga teni rang or korang ngo zena mendu sim koranga rangjin zena te korang hakon rogore ko lamsang tenji je sambao teni hakon rogore.
And it's possible when one's faith in one's teacher is really burning like a fire, that one can very rapidly gain realization into the basic nature of the mind.
Tatindi raising so teni lama tabate karchin yembatang teni tel loma lama la taba yang boyung kin sola susula nyam to yang boyot yung serdang tati sushat na pe mambo teni tamjid mambo shaji yore te zurji yomare shatsaji yomare counter susu tomar taba yang boja de karchin boris.
So in terms of the importance of faith and in the importance of faith for practice, etc., there's been much said about this, there's been much written about this, and almost in an endless sense. The end of the day, though, sort of bringing it all into summary, the faith is extremely important, and we should work hard on generating it. And now I'd like to turn to the text for this evening's teaching.
Number jarwe tiktam la yunga dab jigso nyang dab jit pa mi zem drelam gon jarwa kan di yeshi gon jarkan yeshi jingdi ko je ja horo jon taw jigni tam ne chen rola mambaram jot ta sone teni tambo teni jipchen jamba yang la teni chopar jot teni jipchen jamba yang la teni sorate pa ti gimchen ki teni lama yujno rosona ta ngarang rang teni kaja karisha na tam karisha na ti simchen samala panya boto ba yongya o tendizla teni surdip teni nores.
So the first verse of tonight's teaching is a homage to Manjushri. And the reason that we do this, as Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok himself said, was for the reason that the reason of the aspiration that every single word he utters is of benefit to all sentient beings.
Tanitanga so Lama Damnak, Tenizia, Teniz Yoris, Shirtanga so Shir Namba Nala Tindi Yori, Tin Nala so Taba Chimbo Nala Yori, Tin Nala Capertum, Natso Sang Dorje Tabata, Zoba Chimbo Nala, Lama Mangak Zena, Lama Damnak, Tenizia Yori, Tepe Karchimbo Tsugre.
Whether it's the Mahayana teachings or the Vajrayana tradition, we talk about the instructions of our teacher. And particularly in Vajrayana, in the Dzogchen tradition, we talk about the pith instructions of our teacher or the practice instructions from our teacher, and we regard this as extremely important.
Tani lama damga ze ande nga so kandizla kolgo rezena pena nga so zama lena tani pena choma tani zama nga lan devya ga chai na re jamba ye nap chuan ta tamanda mambo tani choma chama shokchi la jini mambo ze tani duni jariona tani tin na ne pena nga so tin na la ta zama zona tani tin na ne choma len tani tin na la namlu Tinala Georgie Tap, Tenishini Yara Zayanda was Zogo Reze. Teni Shertangazo Chuti Penatini, Tabachimbo Chuti Penangazota, Zama Zoya, Tapshinda Ote, Mari Zamanda or is a Penangazo, that Derma Mambo Jane Pena, Soma Derma Mambo Ja, Tani Num Tendija, Tani Georgie Mambo Jajayona, Tangatsun so Candichini Zama Zogore, Candichina Jimbo Yore, Teniti Tapshis Gores.
So we can liken instructions for practice to making or the art of putting together an extremely delicious meal. So we can imagine that in a kitchen, all the vegetables are laid out on individual plates. Then we have countless small saucers with various kinds of seasoning on top of it. We have oil, we have other necessary ingredients. And then it is a matter of working out or devising a way to put these ingredients together in a way that is extremely delicious. And we can say that the instructions of our teacher are like, for example, being told to put this amount of vegetables in the pot, then to put this amount of seasonings, put this amount of oil in at this particular stage. These specific instructions for how to make the meal in a delicious way is similar to the way that practice instructions directly from our own teacher work. In the Vajrayana teacher, we sometimes say that even the advice or the instructions of our own teacher is sometimes even more important than what the Buddha in fact said. Of course, we're not saying by this that So we're not saying by this that the Lama knows, our own Lama knows more than what the Buddha did, or that our own Lama knows better than what the Buddha taught.
Teni te maina tanga so sangi ga song le kyang lama ga song de karchimbo reze ati ze gu gimsang kare reze na teni sangi ga song de pe jachimbo reze pe na nga so tari tinala chuma derma mambo ja teni george mambo ja teni namra mambo ja na teni tanga so gari chini zama zo go de nga so ha go yo mare te na sangi ga ti song is at the pe Jachimbo.
But the reason we do say this is that the teachings of the Buddha were very wide, they were very general. So they were in respect to, you might say, an extremely large meal with an extremely wide array of ingredients.
Tani lama songs ya te pe nga cho zama zoya te tani ta tabshi shi gore tani ota tino choma mambu zindu ta ina te gore te go mare ze ndi choma ndang dinin jukure ma to te chaman juk mare ze anda tani tabshi shi ne zama zoya ga tabshi te tani lama ga yakbo za ha go yo re ze ten japo che nga cho sangji ga song te nga cho mix chi ke nyamseleng ko na tani sangji ga song wa te chama nga cho nyamseleng ko na chawan len thoya yo mare te mena tani lama ga te cho chama la ta ni o tan don nyamseleng na tani jukure ti na la chama ndo re ze ne lami tin di song re di jimchen ji sangji ga song le jang lama ga song wa te kar che ze ne ze ya jimchen tin di ji.
So the reason that we do say that at times our own Lama, their teaching is more important than the teaching of the Buddha is for the reason that the Buddha, you might say, laid out many plates of vegetables and many plates of seasoning. Our Lama, on the other hand, provides us the instructions about which plates we actually need and which seasonings we need, which methods and techniques we need to advance in our practice. It's not possible for us to put into practice all of the teachings that the Buddha taught. And so in order to receive specific teachings on what we need and what we don't personally need to take on, this is what we rely on our teacher for, and that's why we say at times that their teaching is more important than that of the original Buddha.
Tani nyamtok yakbo yongken ga tani lama chanyi tang damati gandhi zrezena tani laktsar hachang ga chan thumbo yongken ga zama lenken ga jama wata tenra bores.
So when we talk of a Lama who is extremely qualified and extremely advanced in their realization and practice, we can liken this to an extremely skilled and an extremely qualified chef.
Tani Jimson chiti terisi, tani Jimson nipa te gangrezena, shetan sangji ga soya te, shir semchin mambo la tani tsangmala mar tani song jagwa, shichib ka tani tsangmala song jagwa tani zirez.
And then, in general, we can say that the teachings the Buddha gave were very general and oriented to all beings, a very wide audience.
Ta yena tani semchin so tani yang raga mare zi tsama nesran raga mare tani yena tsama la tani soya te mi tsama la tani chokar rewe zi na tani ngibayo mare susu la nesran mandrawa re nesran mandrawa yena tani koranga natun mandrawa yo mambu yo re natun mandrawa te so takchuk chiya ga tabshi yang tani mandrawa tani go yo re.
However, not all beings are the same. The situation of beings varies significantly, and so in respect of their own particular situation, they need particular methods that are tailored to themselves.
Tani lama ngarang chu mo chola tani charji yore nga chu lama ta nyamdo yorang bore sonde tani nga chu mo gandhi zi yin lama ha go re tani ko sona tani mundela tani chu gandhi zi go re samne tani ta lama te ha go re tani indi tani di kwaranga pena napanda oyina napate chargi yambo yongking tani mamba chila tenna tani mamba kwaranga o napande ta kwarang nate yore tani tela man te jingo re sambanda o te kwarang ha go re te man te jinna te zana tani napala pe pantong ro re tenra bores.
And so the benefit that our Lama can bring to us is his or her capacity to understand our situation, to understand our condition, just as a doctor would understand or come to an understanding of the situation of their patient, and on this basis be able to prescribe them the proper medicine.
Perna jipsun malare pandra boyina tani jabjir marbalo ta korang lama tani korang la dikpu mambo pe mambo tani tang yore ziti dikpu mambo tang ba de so nga so dambi chu toni tanada tini semjin la tini dubu tang kara chokta pena nga so roa mi muchu rang le toni shana tini dubu ti tang ya me panda o tini chi ores.
If we look at the case of Milarepa and his teacher Marpa, then we all know the story of the various sufferings that Marpa inflicted on Milarepa. In the general course of things, in terms of everyday life, or the ordinary course of human interaction or good conduct, inflicting these kinds of sufferings on other beings is not something that we would ordinarily see.
Tani karte marba locha gatini tenji gatini dugpo tangayate mena tani jima jipsam Milarepa tsesila sangjendro yanda oti yomare.
However, if Marpa had not inflicted these very onerous conditions on Milarepa, then it wouldn't have been possible for him to later attain Buddhahood.
Kartiti kapsatini jabjer marba locha gatini Milarepa layang ngatsu sherdang draboshine ta kyorang lojong ya poche gore tani kyorang nyamle ya poche gore ndawo tenjin drabosu yona tani jipsam Milarepa la jini gati kwarangati jimjim ngongir so tawani yo maris.
If Marpa had treated him in a very ordinary way, just telling him to study hard the teachings and be diligent about their practice, and had not applied to him this special consideration and special treatment, then it wouldn't have been possible for him to attain the realization that he subsequently did in his practice.
Tani narang tso tani semnang la yo pi tani nat zegona nyumung pati suma mepa chirgona tani tapshi kandra zela tani mepa chirgo tani nga tso lama ga tani hako yo res tani lami te hako na tani nga tso la tani tapshi te go ne nga tso la tani pandoya te chigre ti gimchen la tani nga tso sanga kanang la tani sangi go songwa te le kyang lama go songwa te kar chigre ze gimchen tini res.
So it's because of the fact that it's our Lama who gains familiarity about our situation and prescribes us a means for ridding ourselves of our own disturbing emotions and attitudes that in the Vajrayana tradition we describe our Lama's teachings as more important than that of the Buddha.
Tani tindi indi tini nga chon dinang la tani lama yujin norin dinang la tani somba te tani lami mangnak ze ya tere ze te nga cho sangje chu mambo yo pi nang ne tani natun jig thola sar dene ta jipu to chorang cho nyamlin che ta ten ju gare so ne tindi che yores.
So this victory doha is a pith instruction from Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, and within this pith instruction he condenses 4 points, and his intention is to say that students should commit themselves or dedicate themselves to practicing these 4 points, and this will enable them to achieve good results in their practice. And the first of these points is the importance of meditating on the Dzogchen teachings. And the second point was the importance of meditating and generating bodhicitta.
Yagbo Zhongsong, Penanga, Rapshung inna Rapshung, Kimba inna, Tini Kimba Tsultrim, Yana, Shanchu Senhua Domba, Yana Sanga Domba, Dombala Mambu Yore, Tini, Gang inna, Te Yagbo Zhongsong, Song Yore, Te Samba de Teres.
And the third point is the importance of keeping ethical discipline. So whether that be vows of ordination or household vows or bodhisattva vows or tantric vows, the third point emphasizes the importance of keeping ethical discipline for one's practice.
Tani jipati nga chu muti mu yakbu che go re ze ma to ba nga chu mu dugbu zi na tani chu yang zhe go ma re ze chu zhe go na yang tani mu yakbu ma je ti nga chu mu chu yakbu zi yo go re mu chu yakbu zi yo na tani ti to la la chu zhe go re ma to ba nga chu mu chu ti me na la chu zhe go ma re mu chu ti la chu go ti ma jin da bo re mu yakbu zi go re ti je ti yo na tani nga chu ma bo me na ti je te go tani zhe go re so yo re.
And then the fourth point is the importance of being a good person, being exercising, doing good things, having virtuous conduct in quite a mundane sense. This, in Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok's opinion, is the basis, the foundation for future Dharma study. Without essentially being a good person in speech and conduct, then it's not possible really to progress in one's Dharma teachings. So that's the first point, the importance of meditating on the Dzogchen teachings.
Lam yangzab osar nyangboyi tsiktupi chitsa shiro shit anat gumna dawa trikitur ndokona nyanga khwawe tamsong da nga tso dzogba chimbo ti gum thamna da te tharwa thopa ti she marguware ta dzogba chimbo tsikti so nga tso nawa ga nangla thobna yang thuna yang ti thutur je gare tini rambu yen rambu marguwa shini ti tharwa thob gare.
So the second verse, beginning to hear the teachings of the most profound path of luminous essence, this verse refers to the fact that not needing to mention the capacity of the Dzogchen teachings to enable us to attain liberation, this goes without saying, but even hearing the sound of the teachings, the words of the teachings, enables us to plant the seeds of liberation through hearing, such that people who are fortunate enough to hear these teachings will attain liberation in a relatively short period of time after hearing them.
Dzogba chimbo tondi gomna, tani yakpos tani gomtabna, tani tam mi halepa ga tani wambo numbo zia tani yore wambo numbo zia te halepa kumbore ngaso shetang kanala pe kumbore karti tani ga wambo numbo mangji yakpo yongken segre ta korang kar mangji thumbo yongken tani zina dawa chuk nala yang tani tharatop kore sone tani son yore dzogba chimbo chipzin nyangtik zia ti nala tani son yore.
And it's said by Jetsun Nyintuk that a practitioner of a very high level or a practitioner who is of a particularly high level of disposition towards the practice, it is possible for such a practitioner to achieve liberation within 6 months of Dzogchen practice.
Tani Dzogpa Chimbo te gomna, tani mangje pe yakbo yongken ang tangbo te tso, tani tsin ditola te sang jigre.
And in the Dzogchen teachings, it's said that the practitioners with the most solid foundations, practitioners with the highest foundations, it's possible for them in this lifetime to attain Buddhahood.
Tani mjangbu rawo te so ina, mjangjang rawo te so ina, tani pardo la tani sang jigre se ta nga tso dzogba chimbo na la tani pardo nyamli mambo yore, te so la lojong shina te pardo ni sang jigre.
And for practitioners of a perhaps more middling level, it's possible for them to achieve Buddhahood in the Bardo state.
Tani tama te yena, tani tama rawo yena, tani kewa shimala, tani nga tso perna tari tsendi tola nga tso zoba chimbo wang to, chut to, tani nyamling yang kala kansam che, tani shena, tani tse jimala, tani lobchanga lombi kapsi yana lo nishi tsanga lombi kapsi tani zoba chimbo chutang chatni tani nyamlin che ne ditoni sanjegre kewa ni matok par go mares.
And even for practitioners of the lowest standard, it's possible for them to achieve Buddhahood in no more than 2 lifetimes. So by receiving Dzogchen empowerments in this lifetime, instructions on their practice, and engaging in Dzogchen meditation to some extent, then even if one doesn't achieve Buddhahood in the Bardo state, then certainly in one's next lifetime, perhaps at age 15 or 25, upon encountering the Dzogchen teachings, then such a practitioner will attain Buddhahood.
lagji or kunduz on the caronium to gavri kishing young tonum. Tening aranso te zobachimbo latari or zobachimbo wang to the zobachimbo chitom nitini chariopati. Aranso keva mambo latini sosa mambo shipitini. Jewa latini tini ngaso tari zobachimbo tam trabaje. Then it's some sim gabushi gores.
And then moving on to the next verse, beginning, the fortunate ones who encounter these teachings, refers to the fact that those who are so fortunate in this lifetime to receive empowerment, Dzogchen empowerments and instructions on the Dzogchen teachings are extremely blessed, and their blessedness is the karmic ripening of a great deal of merit accumulated in previous lifetimes.
Tenita zobachimbo gomba teni nipati teni shanship sim gomgore.
So the first point, the importance of meditation on the Dzogchen teachings, and then the second point, the importance of meditating on bodhicitta.
Anin jigrong korwi semjennam tandi sala woyongshir jan panji samshut kurtuvji rangchinzen hali tujin dors. Tenin korwa nala yongken ga semjen teso tamchu pola teni nyarji Gores, Naranto Namgin, Naranto, some Ranchibuti, Halipa, the Chibushin, it in Richigre, that the partition the parate Torgo, retini, Jella Pambi, the Nil Samloina, a Jella Pambi, Lega, and that is also Tandling Gores.
So this verse is talking about the importance of letting go of our selfish attitude and taking on an attitude of concern for other beings and cultivating altruistic thought and action in respect of other beings.
Tani Shanchivchi Simti Tini Yabos Tini Mena Tini Yang Aranso Tini Leka Gang Lena Yang Tini Yang Taravat Toyata, Sanjit, Caberta Sanjit Toya, Tendi Yong Tavgo Mare, Tina Shanjuji Semde, Maranzo Zobachimbo Gomna, Shanjuka Semde, Koranti Mangela, Yindamanda Gore.
If we don't have a foundation in bodhicitta, then it won't be possible for us to attain Buddhahood. So from the point of view of the Dzogchen teachings, bodhicitta is extremely foundational.
Aman Gandu Gumper the Yingo, Gom Tori de Horan the Yinjin, Tartari comes in the Egyptian, Loma Mangyam in the Lamzut, Sitanga to Shanshipchi Simti Tini Gumna, Denis Soso Rang in Natani, Deep Hanchuni, Tini and Yarwa Yetakan Sung Nala, Doyo Maris, Shanship Sim the Gum Tsar, Shanship Sim Yapozo Yona, Deep Hanchu Tsavani, Tini and Sunland or Maris in Mute.
So moving on to the next verse, the door to hell will thus be blocked. This is talking about how practitioners who are able to generate stability and are able to generate strong bodhicitta in their practice will never again need to descend to the lower realms.
Me Mambo's got the Jangato Chulatini, Damga Mamboshi, young Kapkaps Samnangato, Ndigumna Gavsaresam, young Kapkaps Tati Gasamarangato, Ndigumna Gasaresam, me Mambo's got Damgashi in the Mambushi or Resim. Reti Shanship something also Damkaka Kishi or Mari Yindam and that Gumgo, in the Lumambo Mashi, in the Gum, Turgum, Tindigo Lumambo Mashi, Lusim Childrikatoni, Tini Shanship something, Nandan Yabunyamlin Chegores.
Oftentimes, practitioners of the Dharma, they are fickle-minded. They think that practicing this kind of meditation is beneficial. Other times, they think that this kind of meditation seems like a good thing to do. In any case, in respect of bodhicitta, this is something that we shouldn't waver in our minds about. It's something we necessarily need to dedicate ourselves to. And so this verse is advising us very strongly to dedicate ourselves to the cultivation of bodhicitta.
Yet Kor Phuntsok Dharmaraja, yet Monbi Sambal Hopunga, Tol Harjin Ruim Chordon Chok Chunachum. Genjim Chok the Zons hitting also Tarwaganani Yara and Korwaganani Tang around Taratov go Sambagatini Simtak Zamjit Tini 담자 된디 샘거나라 된디 용야데라 님중 제그레지 님중 되니 님중 때 약보즈 요나 되니 님중 디 톡니 되니 알아서 배나 첨바이나 데 첨나네 바틴디지나 되니 포랑 코랑 게임hin가 돈반라 오즈 되니 샹주생와 돈바지 되니 돈바 되지니 되니 돈바데 약보즈 되니 송고 그래지다 돈바데 알아서 미 소소고 되니 네처럼 만자와레 가시가 돈바 망보송나야 송탑거래 가시가 뇽뇽 마토 송탑고 말했대 강디스 송 소소랑가 타고잖아 초코레.
After we've generated an extremely strong resolve in our own minds to be free from samsara, to transcend samsara, then we say that we have generated a strong renunciation. And after we've done this, then we have the option of taking a variety of vows. They may be the householder vows, they may be other vows. This really depends on individual situations. Some people are able to take many sets of vows and keep many sets of vows. Other peoples are only able to take on relatively few. In any case, this is emphasizing the importance of keeping ethical discipline and guarding the vows that we do undertake to keep.
Tani ndanyamna ngandrum thamin kyam rango mangkor langtorum tikan sonre te indi tani kate tsutum yakbo machongna tani te ngansong la tani jogore indamada chongore te indi tani rangango mangkor ashini tanga su chudubgo na kandi dubgo ndanji dubgo samne mi mangboz ke chu yakbo dub sam go yore ta ina ngong korne kandi dubgo hako yo mare tani ngong korki yo mare tangbo tsutum gore tani tsutum go jog tone tani rembe yaran jona tani yakbo yongore na tani tomar tela nyamlin che gores
Yanja sona chokambula.
Tsutum zeyate te tsutum de machongna te ngansong lan jogores tani ta tsutum de nga tsum mambo ngong korne chu yakbo drop samna yang tani kang drop go hamako ni ngong korne de yore ta ina ngong kor go mare tangbo tsutum tong gore tani rembe ro gores.
So it's important that the ethical discipline that we have undertaken to keep, we are committed to doing so. If our vows become weakened, then we potentially descend to the lower realms. Many people are very confused about how they should go about their Dharma practice. Should they practice this meditation? Should they practice this method? The most important thing to begin with, everyone should be aware of, is the foundation of ethical discipline.
Tani shertang chu tepe mambore chu zeyate do nga tani nga layang mambo yari jachimbore tinji je ta yinnayang tani nga chu nyamlin shi pikaps tani ndosumbo ti nyamlin shi na ta tin nga ndeyore tin jogore chite jokba chimbo nyamlin shi gore 니데 샹칩 그 semke gore simde sosoranga ta domba mambo songtomna nyongyong songtomna gandri inna teni domba kashi teni songore te songna te simde yo songna teni tan jingro.
So within the sutric teachings and the tantric teachings as well, there are infinite, almost seeming practices that we could choose from. So really, what Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok is teaching in this Victory Doha is that three main points are enough. Practice of the Dzogchen teachings, practice of the cultivation of bodhicitta, and also the keeping of some extent of ethical discipline. If we can practice and keep these three things in a dedicated way, then this is sufficient for us as a practice path.
Teni ngarang so nima re ge teni nyamlin ti nang la teni ndso sumbo te changwa zi yong na pe yakshu re zi teni te so sumbo te chang nduk ta mnduk ta go re.
So if we are able to really dedicate ourselves to these three things, or these three paths, then this would be very good. Whether or not we are able to do so is something that we need to individually evaluate ourselves.
Tsultrim Chungwazaya de Ngazota Gimning Dombajina Ja, Tini Domba Ganjina Dombaji Tsavi Jini, then Azoti Sung de Natini, Namgini Yogre Mato, Nimaration, the Jambachi Go Mare, Koranyam Masona, Tabra Yores.
In terms of vows that we take on, they're not necessarily something that we need to work on, as it were, every day. For example, if we've taken the householder vows and we haven't weakened them or they haven't deteriorated them, then there's no need for us to renew them on a daily basis.
Teni ti tolap nga chon teni samlo tanggo re se pena nga cho ngamo teni thanschila gomgyap teni gongmo teni thanschila teni gomgyap teni shena teni pena ngamo nga cho teni lami namjur don teni jokbachimbo gom teni go re.
So if we are going to have a session of practice in the morning and one session of practice in the evening, then in the morning, for example, we could start off by reciting Guru Yoga and then doing practice on Dzogchen.
Tani gongmo, tani nga zo semjin tamjala nyangji gum, samba shangchim shokto semkit, tani shangchim ko sem gum go re se gongmo.
And then we could reserve our evening practice session for the cultivation of bodhicitta. And if we were to practice like this, then our daily practice would incorporate all of the points that are covered in this text.
Then in this symbol, the Sir Dona Sumrese, then the parties a Gibon or Shishana, the Niam Shanship Kasemda, Monroda, the Soyang Rembetin in Drogore, the Sundrotana Paya Boyores, it's Hama Chatsambas and Rotamna, Matsopena Monro, Tamoshi, Monroda, the Nitaman Nanga Monro, so Chatsamba in the Yabon Rotamna, the Paya Boyores.
Of course, this text is condensing, is abbreviating the 3 points. It would be best, of course, if we were able to practice in a sequential and systematic way, beginning with the external preliminaries and then moving on to the internal preliminaries and completing these systematic practices.
Tani nga tsangma so rang nyamling kan la kan ri kan do chu samlo zang go re kari ta nga tsatam in the house tani ne shangship ko sem gum nyama relation ta ngarang gum gun do is tani nga rang zogba chimbo gum gun do ta mend tani chu ta go re tani ka tani mas chi kan la te sambo te changyo na tani pe yak bo re tani tan dik song re.
So this is something that is for individual practitioners to assess for themselves. We need to ask ourselves, am I keeping ethical discipline? Am I working on the Dzogchen teachings? And am I working on generating bodhicitta? And if in one's individual practice one is managing to do all these 3 things, then that's great. You're managing to dedicate yourselves to what is a complete path of Dharmic practice.
This sum ganala tanga so Tsultrim chongse domba chongse tini song yore domba zi kiti par mambo shenda pe mambo yore se yina tsawi tsawa ngoni te chong ra odi kangre zena tini semchen la no pa ma shiwa te dina la nda yore se semchen la no pa ma shi pa te tini Tsultrim go tini tsawa ngoma te te res.
So tonight we've talked about the keeping of ethical discipline in respect of keeping vows. In terms of vows, there's a lot that can be said, a lot of very complex content. But if we're going to really talk about what the basic or most fundamental, essential meaning of keeping ethical discipline is, well, it is not engaging in action that causes harm to other sentient beings.
Sherdanga Joncherga Nala Denken Chiginan, Teni, Leka Mambole Gore, Tsovagotola, Noshik Mamboyore, Litongotola, Noshik Mamboyore, Tena, Tangatsu Nimar Tabartni Mambo Danganda, Teni, Shak Mambo Sarianda, Teni Mambo Legona, Kabuyor, Tenti Kati, Tenti Mayona, Teni Natso Sumbuti, Nyamlin Shijanate, Tinala Samandoyaris.
Of course, it's really wonderful if we are able to engage in other kinds of Dharma practice. However, many of us have extremely busy lives. We have a lot of pressure, work pressure from our everyday lives. And so for this reason, it's a convenient and condensed teaching that is very beneficial, nevertheless, if we commit ourselves to these 3 points of practice.
Tangazo chudnayang teni chugo nat yabote hakogore nat jawote yaboz njishi gore matok batini ngazo chu tambi chuina chugo nat jabote yaboz mashina teni ngazo chu mambo le denaya sawi nyambo jawo yabo remena yang pamba chimbo mebatin jendore.
In terms of Dharma practice, it's very important that we grasp what the main point or the key point of the teaching is. And if we're able to do this and to focus on this in our practice, then we will achieve good results. If we don't do this, if we aren't able to do this, then we won't.
Tani tambichu natti yaboz tani yaboz tamzin tani yaboz shisona. Teni ngazo ju mambo's machine tinala teni chokore teni natti kangrezina tarikona shapati sumderes.
So even if we don't have a vast knowledge of or comprehensive knowledge of the Dharma teachings, by knowing what the key points are, then this in itself is enough. And so what is being pointed out in tonight's teaching is 3 main points of practice.
Tani tati ola tani mayak bochi ya tani te shakare ta mayak bochi yid kanjila zegrezinda te shakare siti ola.
And below, moving onwards, the next thing that is talked about is the importance of being a good person.
Tani tikand samshu chotang tan sone tani ngaso tidang namba kand namda nam yin nayang tani ngaranso Samba, Samlo Tansarda, Tani Lega Lesser. Teso Tamch, Pongazo, Mi Mambozio, the Mi Jambato Tan Gores, Samatan Tumbuli, Tumbushi Gores, Tapena Soso Gerke, Tani Samlo Tansarda, Tinti Mandava Yona, Chocolate, Yinaya, Mi Jambato Tam Tumbuli Gore Matobading, also Leka Kawalena, Sama Mountain, but Chitang Mountain, but in Gilena, Tinjukumari, Matsama, Tantani Tun, Yapo Pariapo Tunni. And
in respect of this, the first piece of advice is to work towards being in harmony with other people. So it's okay if we've got our own ideas about how things should be done, but in general, we should try to operate in a way that brings us into harmony and accord with those around us.
Tani Mujambala tani Tun Mashinkan, or Teniso Kaja Shepa, Lekalea, Sama Mijamba, Simlan Rota, Mandrota, Mijamba, Tintin Dota, Mando, the Tsawali Martubar, Teni Koran Rangakarishina, Tendishana, Tenindogamares.
So some people aren't disposed to doing this. Their speech and their action always seems to create conflict between themselves and other people. And in terms of being a good person, laying the grounds for our Dharma practice, this kind of conduct is not appropriate.
Teni Tindiga me Jambala tenis Yapo Mutun Kangati Mutisola, as a poke tenis Tanhuiganala. Tani Zukorajunda or Zukorajun, the parent Chotin is Chibore, Tindawore is.
In a Tibetan proverb, we talk about people who are always getting into conflict with others. as
Zokraju.
oh yeah.
Nyuja.
Yeah, we talk about them as like having bull's horns.
Yeah. Teni Korang susu rangla teni the Janda Mandrawa Samluyo na the chocorese mi girk teni Samlo Tansarta Tawa Mandrawata teni yona chocorese yinayang teni penangaso mo Nishisum Ngapchin New Janda teni yona gaso pena chusok chikanala mo ngapchin raw teni yona teni Korang gerla Samlo Tansar yo machokse teni kajamari yo chocorese reti yinayang Koranga Leka Ganglena Kaja Gangri Jana Shana teni Tsama mi jamba tsama la teni mi jamba gandopa yona teni tinji lea matoba teni jamba gandopa mena teni koranga samlo tinji yona yang teni le jana teni muschik dang ma teni koranga gandopa tata lena teni mi tsama gardari yongore teni kumari tsama tumbo chegores.
So this doesn't mean, as I mentioned before, that people aren't entitled to have their own ideas or their own views, but if we are to operate in a collective situation, such as here in a Dharma center where you might have 50 people or 70 people or 100 people, in general, when we go about undertaking work, then we should do so in a way that brings others into harmony and not act in a way that sows conflict. And so this is the first criteria of being a good person, a virtuous person. And the second criteria is being an honest person.
Leka legona pena leka kabu kamu tindizi legiona pena yungbu chongchong teni leka kabu tindizi legiona teni te ngarang rangam mule mi jamba zigla par le ti tapshishi teni leka le labo yunggu chimbu tindizi yona te ngarang rang teni raya ga tapshishi anda te tindi tela oyorgi zegere tindi meba changmu shine pena leka kamu teni 용법 충충 인간때 앵아랑글레 고야 있나데 앵아랑글레 데미 잠바즈 코랑글레 고야 틴디스 동거 돌아래요나 데니 코랑글레 틴딘자 보마토바 데니 탑신자 문다시네 데니 수수랑그 게르라산로타네 틴디 마시바 장부 시바텔라 데니 미야보시아가 차키니 파레스.
So in talking about honesty, we mean not being sly, not being cunning, not being tricky, not, for example, trying to push all the difficult work that doesn't generate much income onto other people and try to use all kinds of wily ways so that the easy work and the work that makes a lot of money comes into one's own hands. These are all examples of behavior or ways of acting that undermine an honest character. So being honest and being upright, this is the second criteria of being a good person.
Jisen ronken ta teze grese nilik jisen ronken ma tok batni tin jamra mambu ma shinge ta tonda te tong thola kanti na tendi shinken o tendi la ze grese jut tambo ze ade.
So we also say in respect of this the importance of being honest, we say that a person is someone who acts in accordance with the situation at hand, doesn't try to do all kinds of tricky things, and is down to earth and honest.
Teni chakin somebody karezina teni samba karuz ngatsu pognana samba karuz ate teni jampan janla pansim yonken deze rezeta mi jamba chila pambayona ngarang gabo shinken teni mi jamba chila teni dugboyona ngarang gayang teni te sim tela sim krishinken 어떤지 사심 남닥신ken 던지라 제거레제 테마토 바페나 나랑라 가보지요나 테니 나랑 가보시 미잠발라 가보요나 테 나랑 셈라티니 마르가완로 던지 마임바 미창말라 테니 판심 약보용ken 데제그레 테니 테 창마가니 까치슈티 데레.
And then the third thing is, the third point is having pure intentions, or what is described in Tibetan as having being white-hearted, or having a pure-hearted. And in respect of this, we mean someone who is altruistically oriented towards benefiting others, someone who is happy when they're able to benefit others, and someone who approaches others with pure intentions. And this is extremely important. So in everyday speech, when we talk about being a good person, there are all kinds of ways that we might imagine a person could go about being good. However, for the purposes of this text, we single out 3 criteria. And you might say that if a person succeeds in being able to do all these things, then they can be regarded as a good person.
Leka leate ngaso pena mi jang tini phambati drivna tini ngarang chogo rangton ti tini drv yongorez na sherdang ngarang ga rang tini ngarang rang la phamba zu shi samna je ngarang la khepan yongken da ngarang la yakpo yongken ga leka tini zingi drv samna tambu nge jala phanto gogrez nge jala phamba yongken ga leka da lena tini ngarang la tinang ni phamba ngoni te tinang la yongorez.
And then the second part of this verse addresses when we are wanting to achieve our own aims, when our purpose in engaging in a certain action is for our own benefit or our own profit. And the advice here is that we should first act to benefit others, and through doing so, the benefit that we derive will ultimately be our own.
Tini ngaso mi mamboze ko rang la yakbo yongya ge chet tini mo jamba la no pa ya ta pena ngaso rang la tini pamjur yo yongya ge chet tini mo jamba la ngor kor tang ya da zin tang ya da tini chikma che jin da tini ge leka mambo le re pena tinja bo shi ni rang yakbo yongya ge chet rang la no pa she ge mi mambo o tini chi na tani me janla yang no pa yong gore rangla yang no pa yong gore rangje ni kala no pa yong gore rang dun yang jib ma re.
Many people who are wanting to achieve their own aims do so by engaging in activity that harms other people, whether it's by telling lies or by cheating them or stealing things. In doing so, such people don't actually work to their own benefit. They work in a way that harms both other people and themselves at the same time.
Tsirndala machu sang ma zerze tini ngaso lo tong chak chik da tini samgya ga tini kongla ngaso churje songzeng gambo tini machu sang ma chitik zya ga tini chim chitik tini song yore te song ma tsir dana tini dinang lan da gres.
So during the imperial era of the Tibetan Empire, 16 rules for human conduct or ethical human behavior were compiled. And the second last verse of the Doha, this is what is known as Pure Rules for Human Conduct, refers to the fact that what has just been mentioned regarding how to conduct oneself as a good person is the essence or the condensed essence of these 16 rules for pure human conduct.
Teni jimba tong ya reze pena simjin chila phamba che gona teni tangpo korang la chi jimba kala kansam teni par tango re te ton tangpo reze teni nipa de kang reze na teni korang la kaja nyembo yakbo che go she go re korang ka simlan rongkhang ka kaja teni she go re te ni reze tangpo de.
And then the line, the skillful path of the victorious ones of the 3 times and the essence of the four attractive qualities of a bodhisattva refers to the Buddhas of the past, present, and future act in four skillful ways. The first being through generosity, dana. The second being through pleasant or attractive speech.
Penanga cho loma girgin chikatini loma jigla sochong yakbo zitini koranga she samna tani koranga lopchat chia chiputi maimbar te loma te la kacho chu chwa ga thola tani japchur te zite zishit tani namgin koranga kaja yakbo nyambo tinji shet tinji shi tani ti thola sambati tani koranga ga loma ga simla tani yakbo tani reyong kapse tani koranga ta lopchat ngoma te che gore tani tenja boshine ngacho simjin namla te jimbatang kaja nyammo shet tani korangla te chula nyamlin yakbochia te sambares.
So we can liken this to a relationship between a teacher and a student. If the teacher has a mind to be very effective in their nurturing of their student, then they might start off by paying attention to their livelihood situation, perhaps giving them support if they need it, speaking to them in a pleasant and friendly way, and preparing their relationship in a positive and an effective way before actually engaging in the core part of the teaching, or in the religious or spiritual context in the instruction on practice.
Penanga to mula lasha tani pena curang simjing nopa simjing so machizi simjin la nopa mashizi tendi going to par lasha tana tening around so rangyang simjing chokchen yang marema toba penanga so jalla curang simjing chok machizi tendi lasha tang tening arang simjin mambo chokche tendi she dena teni moschikang tanglin je mare teni te jibare.
So if the first point was generosity, and the second was pleasant or attractive words, and the third was then a teaching, and the fourth point here stresses the importance of the person who is giving the advice or instructions to put them into practice themselves. So it's not acceptable if we only advise or instruct others to do things but don't actually undertake this conduct ourselves.
Penanga chun jikting ga tola chung jabna tani chung dikshu de gangrezena chung halipa ga dikshu ngoma de gangrezena ngarang khe tani chung korang ga tani chung japsa ga mut namgin korang la tani chung japsa ga mambu yorwa pena ngarang la chung kang chi yona tani namgin ngarang ga chung kang ga nala yone nga sani chaka mambu nyo dengeng ga mit so pham ngarang khe korang so pham tini resona.
So if we were to take the example of doing business, then the absolute lowliest kind of or way of doing business would be if we solely thought about our own profit and approached our customers with the view of them incurring loss. So all the people that came into our shop buying our various things, if we were solely concentrated on us making money and making profit off them and them being, you might say, ripped off or as a result, then this would be the lowliest attitude with which we could engage in doing business.
Teni nga tsum me mamboz ko te chung yakshu re sam go yore ze ne chung jabya te khe go ton dala chung jab go yore teni ko phamni ngarang khe sona te ngarang go moy ndro song re te chung yakbo re sam go yore re te chung yakbo mare ze kharang korma chi kor ni teni khena teni jima chung jam khen te zo chi go kharang ga sani chakhan yo mare teni kharang go chung de chuma me pa chakare te chung dushu so re.
Many people, however, think that this this way of doing business is in fact an excellent, a very successful way of doing business if one makes profit all the time and others incur loss. Whilst it may bring profit the first time around and the second time around, however, in the long term, customers who see business proprietors acting in such a way are not likely to patronize their business in a long-term way.
Tani chung rangbon rawote 가리츠 거 오리지나 페나 페나 나랑 팜 되니 나랑 총점 그 나랑 팜 나랑라 케치ኛ메 되니 나랑 그 산이 약간 요 댕긴 거 멋대 솔라티니 케요바 되니 레소나 되니 대총 정보 서거래지 때 가리리지나 데 나랑 다리 나랑 라티니 지 케카티니 묘 말이다 옛날 네 삼니 나랑 그 총각하나니 약간 용건도 가랑서 케소나 되 거서 남긴 디능라 용거를 남긴 요나 띵 아칼레칼레 되니 나랑 영 나랑 그더니 케싹나 되니 용거를 대총 정보 디서 그래서
probably a middling attitude with which we could do business would be if we were willing to accept loss in the short term, allowing our customers to gain from a transaction with a view to seeing them slowly continue to patronize our business such that eventually we would make a profit, then this, you might say, would be a middling attitude to doing business.
말에 대총 약보디 있어 그래지 총 약보디 있으면 점선실에서나 배나 나랑라 코르스치랑 나랑라 때니 망보즈 케 망보요 말해지 옛날 때니 나랑 그 총바 나랑 그 산이 약간 용건 때서 케소나 때니 거기서 남긴 망보 용거래지 용나 나랑라 케 망보 메나 때니 나랑 그 케데 야야 망보 속네 때 나랑 지마 총바 첨보 창조 그래 때그 약슈디 대총 약슈디 있어 그래지 나 밤네 때니 총존 때서 총강가 나라 용건 때서 때서 켄로와디 대총 약슈서 그래
The clarification is that this is not a middling way of doing business. This is actually the best way of doing business. To have the attitude that one can take on loss oneself and that the benefit goes to one's customers and that slowly things will improve.
Then I 때즈케 과랑 때즈케 간인 잠님자오래 대총장장라고 써 그래. 약수양 말이 득수양 말이
the idea that at this moment I should have some profit and they should have some profit is the middling attitude towards doing business.
Then 된자보 샤와 창마 때레스 저오데 nga 저거 미잔라 되니 판바약 보 용약 레카데 레나 되니 타미 야카데 랑라 토용 거래 타마 랑글 샤와티서 창마약 본점 좋은도
And it's the same in respect to any kind of activity that we undertake. Ultimately, if we do what we do with the benefit of others in mind, then eventually we will find ourselves being benefited too.
Then nga 좀 muggyang 통통 latana then lamsang ngarang kesona dati ngarang 대충 약순라고 써 그래. 샤와 강인나 때에 람상 아케소나 ngarang 약본라고 써 그래다. Then 말해서 양랑보 latana then 양랑보다 then 푸랑보 용큰 거 레칼이나 then 잔라 판바들이나 소소랑 운이 장내 그 약하티 티나리 용거 요래.
So if we're just to have a very short-term idea of what personal gain is, then we would think that to get profit in the short term is what's best for us. However, we should have a long-term notion of benefit, and according to this kind of attitude, we would see that by doing things that benefit others, ultimately we will also be benefited too.
Tendiga samlo tangne namjin teni me jambala pamba yakbo dripshinkin gmatela teni me yakboze zegores.
So, based on this, we can say that a person who habitually considers the benefit of others and works for the benefit of others is a good person, a virtuous person.
Teni tenjabores tangazo 추드블릭데서 되니 돌디니 드린드리 고레스 오네 돌디즈레스 있나요? 되니 페르다 조바친보 공고레스 오레 데리나 다 조바친보 가레 공고레스나 되니 당아서 문턴니 로종신네 되니 곰기다 되니 샹집 그셈 공고레스 다 샹집 그셈 가레 공고고즈나 되니 양양케 로종신네 공야다 소 토라 되니 mambu즈 요렌디 톱갑스라나 되니 돌디파시네 소요레스.
So tonight we've looked at some abbreviated points for our practice, for Dharmic practice. We started with the importance of meditation on Dzogchen and then went on to bodhicitta practice, because we haven't had enough time to go into detail, though, of course, about what each of these practices concretely involve. These are things to which we need to commit much further study.
Tani nda mabjid lotsu nam soni tani tanda jinyangmari soni lan ni la soni warisi mabjid se jinyangmari gang jinyangmari zena matso jangton drya te jinyangmari jamgiton drna te randun dripi tsawa yembati jinyangmari soni tamate soni waris.
So the final verse begins with the line, "Be sure not to forget this." In actual fact, in the Tibetan, it says, "Don't forget this, don't forget this." So it's repeated 2 times. And what students are being urged not to forget is the point about doing action that is beneficial for others, and particularly the point that even if one is oriented towards one's own benefit, the best way for doing this is still to engage in behavior that's beneficial for others.
Tets songyoate teni ngacho bok teni kanshut ta teni ti charge kanshu ka charge ko la teni songbare teni te par gigi shini shanna teni te la teni likki tamju zini teni tamju mambo yore divjana tan de sores.
So the advice that we have about being a good ethical person at the end of this teaching is something that there are many kinds of texts on in the Tibetan tradition, and this is what we find at the end of this text.
Tenita ngacho kongla ti tamju kharang ka nangtun ti joshati so teres tini changma ga nyamlin yakpo chege yore ta ti nyamlin kartin din nang tar tu shini ngacho kongla sha pa simbo ti nyamlin yakpo shi ti tola ngacho namjin chowa ga nangla tani lega ga nangla mojan la phamba yakpo dune dena tani ngacho chudan jikti nika te tin nangla tini ndro gores nika tin jigro gores.
So if everyone is able to attend to these 3 points of practice, and as well in their everyday worldly lives engage in behavior that benefits others, then we will be able to bring together both our worldly lives and our Dharma practice in a complementary way. And the final verse of this Doha is a dedication of merit. And so the merit of the words of this text, may they be dedicated to delivering all beings from samsara and enabling them to be reborn in the Western pure realm.
Teni lama yujino teni nyungni teni ta yerambo teni nyungni teni nyungji yara chakbi kapsa teni somba teni res.
And then at the end of the Tibetan version, there is a line that records how this text, this song, was composed by Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok after a period of long illness. And he composed this song after he had been cured.
So
that brings to a close this evening's teaching. And I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone.
Jumbo
Shedun Jimba, good Zombo, Deon, Deja, Lida, Ganji, Jesus, Lolo, Viva, the Danja, Randa, Zojabe, Java, Danja, Wagala, Zoda, Namba, Naka, Zawa, Naka, Zombo, Juja, Randa, Warrior. Lasso, Teni, Samagan Yamlin, Yabo Jerochi.
Thank you, everybody. May you all practice well.
Teni Jimatarun Karte Korkoviona, Teningazo Yankir, Yang Samalanga to Chutusha and Tendi Yang, Jimakale Yungere.
And I hope that in the future we have the opportunity to come together again for another teaching.
Teningazo Yerimbochi, Lomazo, Penyamli Yabo, Jere, the Montanite, Tindishina, Tenindrikaji, Tenatingazo Bobazo Yang, Tenichi Lojo Yabochea, Nanchula Lojo Yabochea, Tenikala Kansam, Suso Randa, Garwatan Sambigoni, Tenin Yavlensia, Tetsutola, Mazo Bobazo Yang, Teni Hartsun. Shegore, Jigna, Shegore, Retang, also Bobatsoina, Teni Sachan, Dizila, Sark, Teni Levin Caps, Yanchi, Lojonda, the Sola, Chakin, Duman, Teni Mambo, younger Rete, Yena, Tangasun, Denina, Teni Rupach Sokonala, Teni, Dendigasu, Japkiriapo, Teni Nant, Tena, Chakimpe Yaborjindu, Teni Bobatsoyan, Shik Jamne, Teni Yabun Yamlin, that so Narona.
So, Rigpa students are good, working well on their practice, and I hope that they continue to work diligently on their practice and achieve good results. At the same time, the Tibetans who are here this evening, it's my hope that you are able to work on studying the Dharma and engaging in some level of practice, even though it's difficult as new people are coming to a new place to find the conditions to study the Dharma and to engage in practice. Here at Rigpa there is such excellent support from the centre, so I hope that everyone is able to make the most of it.
Thank you and Rashi Dele to everybody.
Yeah.